Well, hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Poetry News, where if you want to walk in poetry, then we have got the shoes. And yes, I did come up with that after a little booze. So let's crack on before you all snooze. Eddie, how's it going?
It's going pretty well. It's nighttime. It's just dark. It's amazing, and I love the fact that I thought the piece was done, but then it wasn't, and that was really cool. So kudos for that. How
Oh,
are
you
you?
mean that? Oh yeah, I'm good, thanks. Coming up with slightly disordered poems in 2 minutes, it seems, which is all good. You know, at least I've gone through quite a big period of writer's block, and I'm finally
Yeah.
starting to come out of that. So yeah, feeling pretty good. We don't quite have the sunny evening temperatures that you have, but we're getting there slowly. It was about 10 degrees today, so little by little.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
So we have a poetically powerhouseical, marvelous little lineup of things on our show today, and hopefully words that are actually grammatical. But first, I want to introduce you to Pete the Temp Bearder, if you don't know him already. Pete Bearder is a UK-based spoken word poet, performer, and educator who often doesn't write or tour the sort of things that you might expect. Pete's Homer to Hip Hop, a People's History of Spoken Word, is, quoting from his website, bringing to life the poetic movements that have shaped history. Find out why wordsmiths have always been vilified, feared, and revered, from the ballad singers and beat poets to the icons of dub, punk, and hip hop. The spoken word has always been the most immediate tool of cultural revival, and this show brings a proud history to life and asks what we can do with it next. And Pete also has a book called Stage Invasion, Poetry and the Spoken Word Renaissance, which is an unwritten history, science, and skill of spoken word, answering some strangely underexplored questions. What is the history of performance poetry in the UK? How does emotional contagion happen in live literature? What has spoken word got to do with hypnotism and ecstatic states? This book explores the thriving ecology of artistry and how it can serve us for cultural, social, and political renewal. Pete's also a spoken word teacher with his own poetry collection published through Burning Eye Books. Just generally breathes poetry. To find out more, go to petethetemp.co.uk. I'd like to ask Eddie, have you heard of Pete? What do you think of these shows and books and the sort of things that he does?
I haven't before preparing for the show, but when I did, I thought I was like, I should have, because two things. First of all, the show that he's putting together, the event, seems amazing. First of all, the title, Homer to Hip Hop: A People's History of Spoken Word, is amazing, and you can see that it is an interactive show. Like, it has some history. It is kind of like a lecture, but not really. You kind of have everything. It's one of the comments says that it is part lecture, part performance, and it's utterly engaging. And you can see that people are just standing there and bumping their fists. It's amazing. But also, what I really like about Pete's work, like, I haven't read it, but like the idea of his work is that there isn't much about modern spoken. There isn't much literature about modern spoken word poetry, or any spoken word like hip hop or punk or whatever, because whenever you look for literature, whenever you're doing your research, whatever it is always stuff that dates back to um, oral narratives. It's always stuff that goes back to the transmission of stories from one generation to another. That's most of what we have in terms of literature, of research, of history. And if you want to find something about spoken word, it's usually just a small paragraph on a website that's like, yeah, this is what spoken word poetry is. Like, you come up and say poetry, and usually it deals with social issues. But a comprehensive history is needed. It's necessary. And I like the fact that he is a poet, but does not limit himself to just writing poetry or just talking about or just teaching poetry. No, he goes in deep. He goes in deep. He goes in depth into the history of it and tries to teach it or lecture it, whatever. It sounds amazing. I wish I could attend those performances. It seems amazing. What are your thoughts?
This is it, isn't it? And it's like you say, there's nothing like, at least if there is something else out there like it, I don't know about it. And I guess that's partly why these books have been written, because there's an appetite and a demand for it. And you know, I mean, to go through this kind of research process, it can't be a short process. But I know I can tell you actually, I discovered Pete. I was listening to Dead Darlings podcast, which I know we featured on the show some time back, and Pete was the main guest on Dead Darlings, and for a good sort of 45 minutes or so, it felt more like 5 minutes. Pete was so incredibly passionate about these books and about this work, and just talking so much about the history of spoken word and just obviously things kind of in the book, and felt like Pete could have talked just for hours and hours and hours and hours about it. Just you could just feel I could just feel the enthusiasm coming through my phone speaker. And you know, if there's that much enthusiasm, you know the book is going to be good. And yeah, you know, I mean, from Homer to hip hop, you know, the period that covers, and the questions that his second book is answering. You know, what's spoken word got to do with ecstatic states? How does it serve as a cultural, social, and political renewal? You know, these are things. You know, you write a sort of if you write, say, an activisty piece or a poem to make a point, or an anti-war poem or something like that, maybe reading this book gives you a greater understanding. You know, like I say, I've not read the books yet, fully intend to. But yeah, thank you, Pete, for writing them. Have you got any more thoughts, Eddie, on that?
Really, thank you, Martin. I don't think, like, whatever we say, it's not going to do justice. I too want to read the book and know, and maybe listen to definitely listen to the podcast, to the interview. Thank you, Martin, for bringing this up. It's amazing.
Well, no problem. Well, we'll link the Dead Darlings podcast episode below, and also Pete's website, petethetemp.co.uk. Check out Pete's most excellent stuff. You won't regret it. And we'll be back right after this.
Hi, I'm the 6th last episode of the night, Eddie. And today I am joining you from Batoon, the north of Lebanon, and I'm bringing you another workshop from Jack's Poetry Festival. This workshop is titled Storytelling in a Poem, and it takes place on April 27 at 4 p.m. GMT. The thing about this specific type of poetry, it's called bop poetry. And it is a narrative poem made out of 20 lines that abandon any poetic structure or any conventions of poetry, like rhyme schemes, syllables, or meters. But here's the thing about it. This one poem that is 20 lines, 3 stanzas, tells a story. It's a narrative poem that follows the chronological order of a short story or of a novel or any narrative, but it is told in poetry. The first 2 stanzas usually give us the problem and all the rising action, and then starting with the 3rd stanza is when we see things either resolve or know the details why it hasn't been resolved. So the host and the facilitator of this workshop is Yvette Angelique, and she is a poem facilitator and storyologist, which is awesome. I want to be that. She runs Narratives for Change, where she uses storytelling as a platform for healing, literary art making, consciousness raising, and advocacy. Yvette produces written and digital poetry chapbooks, teaches creative writing workshops, leads community-based storytelling events, and collaborates with other artists on public art projects. Honestly, goals. Martin, what do you think about this type of poetry, this workshop? What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I just want to echo what you're saying about storyologist. I want to be that as well. That's brilliant. That sounds like I'm not even quite sure what that is, but I know I want to be it. So
right?
definitely.
Neither do I. I don't know what storyologist exactly means, but I just want to be that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all good, isn't it? But no, this it's I not heard of this form either, and kind of there's a reason why we're featuring Jack's Poetry Festival 2 weeks in a row, because they're doing really interesting stuff. Again, this event is free, and also this workshop, it's a crisp 1 hour long, so it's a nice crisp block of time where you can kind of go in, you can learn about it, you can have a go, and you can then head about your day. It doesn't take up too much of it. And it kind of goes with the fact that it is quite a short form. I feel that I'd have a lot of fun trying to write in this form. And the idea of it's a poem, but it's abandoning all of the things that traditionally would make up a poem in terms of rhyme scheme, syllable, meter, things like that. Yet a good bop will still be obviously a poem. I mean, there is this real thing of, like I say, when does a poem stop being a poem? There's something about how it sounds or how something's told. So it's like us talking now. This is obviously not a poem. It's an instinctive thing that we just know, and the bop obviously is, despite breaking a lot of those rules, or even all of those rules. So yeah, I'd love to have a go at this, and thank you to Jax for putting it on.
Yes, thank you. Really, all the details to this workshop and maybe other Jax Poetry Festival workshops, you can check them out. This one workshop will be in the details down below, but you can also check out other events. They're amazing. Honestly, there are tons of events by Jax Poetry Festival, and I'm glad we found it and featured it. And we will be back with Martin right after this.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Poetry News. And we are bringing you a really interesting and also really important free 99 event that is part workshop and also part a performance. So I say we're bringing you. It's by a group called Reclaim Ugly. And Ugly here is an acronym for Uplift, Glorify, Love Yourself, which I think is awesome. The workshop is called For Us With Love, an open mic dream space for Black Maggies. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing that word. And that specifically refers to any and all Black people of marginalized gender. So this workshop is a closed space specifically for people who are that. It's essentially for celebrating the brilliance. It's a community to celebrate these identities where you can come and participate, or you can just come along and share. You can listen into the workshops, or you can take full part in it. And they also have a feature act that will perform for about 20 minutes or so, who will also share how their work impacted them. And then they'll have an open mic after the break for about an hour or so. And another thing I really like, this event has also got automated live captioning. This organization, I'd not heard of before, is making a real effort and point to uplift, to empower, to validate, which I think is incredibly important. They say things like, no one is turned away for lack of funds. This is a night for us and us only, dedicated to our well-being, creativity, pleasure, and future. It's really important for people who need a space like this, and it's here. What do you think, Eddie?
Like you said, I think it is an extremely important event. And the beautiful thing about it is that it is very distinct. It's very like towards a specific group, yet it is inclusive of all. And that's in terms of the vibe or the target audience. And it's necessary because as much as a dominant group is part of change towards a minority group or a marginalized group, there's still sometimes marginalized groups need that safety, that camaraderie, that identity to be shared within themselves before being shared with the rest of the world. And also in terms of the workshop or the event in by itself, what I enjoy is that it begins with a prompt that allows you to write, and then there's a featured performance, and then there's an open mic. So it's like 3 events in one. That's really awesome. What are your thoughts? What do you think?
Well, yeah, it's true, isn't it? It's providing a bit of everything, isn't it? You know, and if you know I'm sure that the feature poet will bring confidence to a lot of other people. I think there's going to be people in that space, perhaps even who aren't necessarily writers, but people who are just looking for a community like that. And I think so it is so important for people who've been marginalized to have these spaces and to have that validation, because so generally speaking, I don't really have lived experience of being marginalized. Where I grew up didn't have margins for people like me, and that's not in any way any kind of brag or anything like that. The reason I'm mentioning that is I know what it's like to not be marginalized, and I know that everybody deserves to have that. It's very unfair that I've had that when other people haven't had the opportunity to do that. And although I can be part of a change to ensure that more and more people are not in the margins, these spaces are critical, and these spaces need to be here, because yes, we can work towards nobody being in the margins, but we're not there yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really hope that wasn't too clumsy and makes a lot of sense.
It does. Thank you really much for sharing that.
Fantastic. So thanks for your thoughts on that, Eddie, and we will be back right after this.
Hi everyone, welcome back. It's Eddie again, not Squigs. Anyway, I am today I'm talking about a form of poetry that honestly I discovered by chance. I was writing poetry and then I wanted to write something else that starts with an E, and then I accidentally hit enter, and then suddenly e-poetry is right in front of me, and I was like, that seems interesting. Let me see what it is about. And I'm so glad I made that mistake, because I discovered a new form of poetry known as e-poetry. Here's the thing about e-poetry. It is poetry that arises from an engagement with the possibilities offered by digital media. This means that it depends on digital media to make its point, to get its point across. The practice is made possible only by digital media and technology. The genre of electronic literature or electronic poetry or e-poetry is amazing. It shapes digital media as diverse, rapidly evolving, and can be used to such different effects, poetry included. Here's the thing about the different types or the different genres or the different types you can get from e-poetry. For example, there's visual digital poetry, which technically takes this idea of visual poetry, concrete poetry, and letterist poetry, and puts them together. It's a poem that moves in by itself. Also, kinetic poetry, it's this display of animation and the changing of information over time. There's interactive poetry, even when you click on stuff and it moves you to another page or another idea that tells you a part of the poem. All of these things are really interesting because this is the type of poetry that rejects being printed. You cannot print this type of poetry. You cannot perform this type of poetry. It can only be displayed on screen. And it's really cool to see how technology has allowed us to do that, because you would tell people about a poem that is showing us words dropping from space to give us an idea of dripping, and then the movement to show us a puddle being having a ripple effect. You wouldn't see that if you tell people like 50 years ago. They'd be like, "You're crazy." Martin, what are your thoughts? I'm excited about this.
Well, me too, Eddie. And thank you for bringing this to mine and everyone's attention who's watching. Because I'd not heard of this until we were talking about it before the show, and it is really cool. I love to play. No, play is fun. What's that phrase? You don't stop playing because you get old. You get old because you stop playing. And this just looks so much fun to play around with. It's like when on the paper in the past, I played around with, for example, shape poetry. Or maybe you've got someone's book and there are QR codes at certain points that take you to video performances of the book. And this feels like an extension of those things. I guess another thing, I don't know if they were in Lebanon, but we had these books as a kid called Choose Your Own Adventure. And you would choose the direction of the story and where it went. And it was just super, super cool. And, I'm imagining all the fun I could have trying to create little things with this, and also just seeking out all the stuff that's going to be on Instagram and all other kind of social media where you can have all these kind of movements and colors and everything like that. But I think more than that, it provides a different way of expressing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing, with this, you can control what people see and when they see it. You can control the pace. I don't know if you've ever done this thing, Eddie, where you're reading a poem and your eye catches something further down the poem and you don't want it to because you want to read through it in order, but your eye can't help almost catching a line in the last stanza or something. And with e-poetry, that's not going to happen unless they intend it for you to happen.
Yeah. It's really nice. I like this idea, how like that you mentioned that e-poetry is a different form of expression. Like all of the other forms require you to read or listen or be there, whereas this specific one, it's you don't necessarily need. I don't need a lot of words that describe a ripple effect. I just need the word ripple with the words jumping, and I get it. That's the thing. We get it. Yeah. And what I really liked about this, especially on the website, which is iloveepoetry.org, the idea that all of these, or most of these current or modern or technological or e-poems have generated or are a result of either earlier poetic forms or the technologies that have happened. And like poetry leads to things, or to other expressions or to other dimensions, but also these dimensions and these disciplines also lead us towards new forms of poetry, which is amazing. We're good?
Absolutely. The more forms of poetry we can have, the better the world is. So absolutely. big up ePoetry. I'm certainly going to be checking it out. So thank you, Eddie.
Thank you, Martin, for your thoughts.
So thank you, everyone, for checking out the show today. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope that you found a lot of the things interesting and things that you're going to want to check out and explore. Are you going to head to the Reclaim Ugly poetry event and workshop? What about the Jack's Poetry Fest? You're going to go along and have a go at writing a bop? You're going to have a go at writing some e-poetry? You're going to get a copy of Pete the Temp's books or head to Pete's shows? Do let us know in the comments. We love to get a conversation going on here. And also, remember, like, share, comment, subscribe, and any other YouTuber words that I'm supposed to say at this point. Eddie.
Yes. Other than liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing, did I get that right? You can also check us out on Instagram and TikTok at the PGN Official. And you can also check us out on Facebook on the Poetry Global Network. We're there. Also, if you want to tell us anything, if you want to send us a link to an e-poem that you created, a bop that you created, you can comment them down below, but also you can send us an email on the Poetry Global Network at gmail.com. That is all we have for you this week. Thank you, Martin, for being here. We will see you next week. Bye.
Cheers. Take care, everyone. Bye.
I did, but then I forgot. Compose yourself, Martin. Keep this.